I have to say that I finished the vast majority of my paintings, thankfully. I have trained myself to do that over the years, but here and there's some pieces that just don't get finished for whatever reason, and these paintings kind of haunt me. I really want them to be finished. So today I'm going to try to finish as many of my unfinished paintings as I can. And maybe I can inspire you to revisit some of your unfinished paintings. Let's go! So here you can see all of the art pieces that have not been finished. It's not that many because I've collected all of these over the years and I didn't finish them for different reasons. For some, I didn't like the paper I was painting on. Others, I didn't like how it was turning out. This one is the first one that I decided to finish today, and this was meant to be a piece that I wanted to teach on a live workshop, and I did not end up choosing this piece. I abandoned this halfway through because I realized it wasn't really looking as good as I wanted it to. I wasn't really that happy with the colors, and it was a little bit too complicated to get it to a point where I would be happy with it. So I felt like it wasn't really suitable for the class that I wanted to teach because I needed something that was super easy to recreate, but still had a good impact and looked really, really nice. And it didn't really check all of these boxes for me, and I just left it that way. But now I decided to finish it. I don't think that this is one of my best pieces. It's average, let's say. I'm not mad about it. I don't hate it, but I also don't really love it. I still know why I abandoned this piece and decided to not teach this in my live class. And I instead taught this one, which was much easier and looked a lot better if you ask me. But I decided to stick this one into my sketchbook. It really fit the colors and the vibe of this page spread with the character design doodles on the other side. So I cut off the borders to make it look more clean, and then I glued it into my sketchbook. And for a sketchbook painting, I'm quite happy with how it looks now. If you want to improve your gouache painting game, then I have good news. I have a free course for you. I will link the sign up in the description box below. You will learn how to recreate this simple gouache landscape, and I show you a little bit of the tips and tricks and techniques that I use when I paint with gouache. So make sure that you sign up to the free course. Again, I will leave it in the description box below for you to sign up. This one I abandoned because of the paper. I really did not like how my watercolor was performing on this paper, and I tried to paint on both sides of these papers. I was actually sent these handmade, I believe, watercolor papers, and they are really, really nice papers. They look really nice, but they're supposed to be for watercolors, and they just would not work with my watercolors. You can see where I started, it was kind of crumply and bled in a weird way, and the watercolor did not want to stick to the paper. It was kind of sitting on top of it, and it was just weird. I was not having a good time, but this time I was using gouache instead of watercolors, so I really wanted to try this paper with gouache, and it was okay. I did not have the absolute best experience finishing this, but I'm quite happy with how it looks. I really like the paper, like the concept of it. I like the way that the paper looks and the kind of handmade vibe and the roughness. So in conclusion, I'm happy with the concept of this piece. I'm happy with how it turned out and the colors and everything. But I really had to take my time to paint and get clear lines on this paper. I really had to make sure that I have the ideal consistency of my paint for this, which was a rather thin consistency, which kind of surprised me because my watercolors were too thin. And then with gouache, I needed a lot of water to get it to work, and it worked pretty well. It looks so much better than what I did with the watercolors. And I also covered everything that I did with the watercolors with gouache. I didn't want these crumply lines to be there anymore. I'm sure that someone appreciates these, the marks that were there before and the way that they looked, but I just did not like it. And to be honest, even though I do use cold press watercolor paper usually, which means that it does have texture, as opposed to hot press paper, which usually does not have a lot of texture, I don't like it when there is too much texture. So if a paper is really, really rough, I am not having the best time working with it, especially with gouache, but also with watercolors, honestly. Like I said, this paper would not work with my watercolors. So I have more of these papers. I have more of them lying around, and I might do more gouache pieces on them because in the end I am happy with the result. It just took me at least double the time than it would have if this was smoother paper. So yeah, this is now finished. I really like it. It has a cheerful vibe with all of these colors. And now we are using the same paper. I also wanted to do this piece. I think I started both of these pieces at the same time and gave up on them at the same time. And then I did the pieces on different paper. I did them a little bit differently on different paper. And here again, I started with watercolors, but now I'm using gouache, and gouache worked much, much better. I'm just so surprised because now when I look at the finished dried up piece, it is a little bit glossy. The paint looks glossy, and my gouache is matte. It does not usually look glossy, so it must have interacted with something on the paper. I don't know what they use to make the paper suitable for watercolors. Usually you put some sizing, I believe it's called, on it. So something is on the paper that interacts with the paint, and I believe it's just a little bit too much of that specific product. I don't know. I have never made paper before, so obviously I don't know anything about it. I decided to keep this piece very, very simple. I could have added so many details, but honestly, not on this paper, not today. But I wanted it finished, and I'm actually really happy with the more simpler design. So this was actually kind of a challenge that resulted in something that's quite cool. So I'm glad that I finished this and that this painting is not lying around unfinished anymore. This is what it looks like now. Very, very simple. And now we have this one. This is going to be the most detailed of them all. I used watercolors for this one mainly, and I had this sketch, and I did this years ago. I don't know how many years. It must have been maybe even before I started my YouTube channel. So at least around 4 to 5 years ago, I did this sketch, and I had this idea of this elf on this creature, and for some reason I never did the painting. I don't know if I doubted my skills at that point because I was just starting out. So maybe I wasn't sure if I could pull it off, or maybe I got bored of the idea. Honestly, I do not know. I don't remember. This never turned into an art piece, and I have kept it all those years in my unfinished art pile. And also, I have no idea what kind of paper that is. I don't know what I was using back then. Must have been some kind of paper that I found in some kind of store. I don't know. It's been so many years, and I am really happy with how it turned out, honestly. And the way that I finished this piece now is not the way that I would have done it back then, because this kind of reminds me of 2020, around that time when I created all of my sticker designs and I did all of these doodles around the animals that I was painting. And this kind of has a similar style, and I really love the colors in this watercolor palette. It's a White Nights watercolor palette. I usually can't find this specific palette online, and I also swapped one of the colors for a teal color. So I urge you to kind of create your own palettes, and you don't have to use a gigantic palette with a lot of paints, because I have a palette that I have a lot of paints in, but I usually refer back to this one because I really like the colors in this one, and it's not intimidating because I don't have so many colors. I have my sap green, I have this amazing golden yellow orangish tone that I really, really love, and I have the teal tone that I added, and then a few other colors that you just need every now and then. But these are just my favorite colors, and so I refer back to this watercolor palette most of the time now when I use watercolors. And I really like it because the paints are very, very vibrant. So if you want more transparent, translucent, or just not so vibrant paints that are not so pigmented, I know that a lot of professional watercolorists don't want to use overly pigmented paint because it's much harder to build the layers. You can't really do as much glazing and other watercolor techniques with paints like these. But honestly, I love the impact of having all of these colors on my page right away without having to build up too much. I'm more of a let's get it done quickly type person, but I'm saying that even though this piece took me at least 5 hours, the footage alone was 5 hours and I didn't film every single minute of it. I had, again, a lot of footage for this video. I feel like I say this all the time. I was powering through editing about 9 hours of footage for this. So I only managed to finish 4 of the art pieces that I had unfinished. I still have 3 or 4. I also probably have some unfinished pieces in some sketchbooks. So if this video does well and if you like the concept, let me know, and I'm gonna do a part 2 of this and finish all of the other pieces as well that I have. Or otherwise, if it's not so popular, I might finish them off camera. I don't know yet, but it was really satisfying to finish these pieces. Honestly, even though I have ADHD and I do abandon projects and interests every now and then, I do that. With my art, I like things to be finished. Like ideally, I want things to be finished. I just can't always do it. Also with books, I want to finish the books that I started reading. It just doesn't always happen. It's often kind of hard for me to let something go that I have started because I just want to finish it. It doesn't matter if it's good or a masterpiece or not. I just want it finished, and I am sure that I have not always been that way. I've kind of trained myself to be that way, especially with my YouTube channel. That has really helped me because every finished art piece is something that I can post. Every finished sketchbook is something that I can film a tour of. So knowing that I have this weekly deadline for producing art has really helped me. It has really made my brain thrive, and that really depends on the kind of personality everyone has. I know this is kind of starting to turn into a podcast episode, and I'm kind of thinking of maybe starting my podcast again. We will see. Let me know if you would be interested in listening to my podcast again. Last time I know I said that I didn't want to stop anymore. Like I didn't want to have a longer break, and then I did exactly that. But it's just never a priority for me. I have so many other things on my plate, and my main priority are my YouTube videos, my weekly long form videos like this one, and yeah, this painting, I decided to do all of these doodles in the background. And at first, I was really loving the concept. I was loving the colors. I was loving the doodles. And then when I was almost finished with the background, I realized the subject is kind of drowning. It's drowning in the background. There's not enough contrast between the main subject and the background. And I just wanted these doodles in the background, but they're not really just a calm background anymore. So here you can see that I was adding some line art with a colored pencil. I've been really loving using this purple colored pencil for my line art and some shading and stuff. And then I also used a white Posca pen to kind of line my subject to make it pop up more like it would be a sticker in front of this pattern or something like that. So you can kind of tell this is the subject and there's a bit more contrast. And it did help, but not enough. So I went ahead and I colored all of the white lines in between those doodles. This was the most tedious task, honestly. It looks quite quick in the recording now because I cut out a lot of that footage and I sped it up a lot. And I don't know how much of a difference it actually makes, but quite honestly, when I look at the footage and I look at before I did this with the white lines in between and then afterwards when I added the blue lines in between, I much prefer how it looks now. So I'm glad that I did it, even though it was very tedious and it didn't really make that much of a difference. It kind of did. Like, it wasn't something big added to the piece, but you can see now that the subject pops so much more in front of the background, and I'm really happy how this looks now. To get some more inspiration for your paintings, watch this video next, in which I will show you some fun and creative painting ideas.